In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Now we are about to begin the discussion on observing the maxims on page 34. Well, observing the maxims, actually, there are 4 maxims, you already know it, and we are going to see what is observing the maxims. Well, maybe in your study earlier in George Yule, you have understood what we mean by observing the maxims. So maybe this part is not so difficult for you to understand, but flouting on the next pages are going to be more difficult for you to understand. Let us begin first of all with observing the maxims. Line 1 says the first maxim of cooperative principle is the maxim of quantity, okay? Which says that speakers should be as informative as is required, and that they should give neither too little information nor too much information. So if somebody asks somebody else, he or she should answer the relevant part of the answer and give enough information as far as the quantity is concerned. So, line 3 says, some speakers like to point to the fact that they know how much information to hear requires or can be bothered with. They don't want to bother others. They don't want to, in fact, give too much information. With anything like, for example, something like the last line of page 34. Well, to cut a long story short, when somebody says, well, to cut a long story short, he or she is going to observe the maximum of quantity. He or she doesn't want to say too much. He doesn't want to be, in fact, too wordy. She doesn't want to be, let's say, giving so much information not needed. You want to have the relevant part of your, in fact, maxim, which is the maxim of quality, and you want to be as informative as possible. Going to page 35, we have the second maxim. You remember the second maxim in your George Yule study, okay? Well, line 4 of page 35 says something like this. The second maxim is that of quality, okay? Which says that speakers are expected to be sincere, to be saying something that they believe corresponds to reality, not false, not being false. They are assumed not to say anything that they believe to be false, or anything for which they lack evidence. If you don't have evidence, you never say things like that in real conversations. So this is again another maxim of conversation, which is maxim of quality, and it must be observed. Now, if you actually look at the conversation below, you see B says something like, as far as I know, in line 2 of the conversation. So I'll ring you tomorrow afternoon then. B says, I shall be there as far as I know. and in the meantime have a word with mama, blah blah blah. Okay, so as far as I know is different from to cut a long story short. Okay, but as far as I know, wants to say that the quality is important. But to cut a long story short wants to say that you want to follow, or somebody's, in fact, observing it wants to follow the quantity. Okay. Well, below this conversation, there is something like line 1b says, as far as I know, meaning, this is the meaning of as far as I know. I can't be totally sure if this is true or not. I'm not totally sure. Okay, so it is quality. Number 3, which actually comes on page 35, and the paragraph beginning with the third maxim is of relevance, somewhere in the middle of page 35. The third is the maxim of relation, which says that the speakers are assumed to be saying something that is relevant to what has been said before. Okay? Speakers are assumed to be saying something that is relevant to what has been said before. Okay? They are not going to say something that is not related, not relevant. Okay? Okay? So, thus, line 2 of this paragraph says, thus, if we hear the baby cry, the mommy picked it up, we assume that mommy was the mother of the crying baby. Okay, not somebody else's mommy. Okay, that picked the baby up, because it was crying. Okay. Now there's another thing showing relation, relevance. Okay, there's somebody at the door. You see, I'm in the bath. So B expects A to understand that his present location is relevant to her comment, that there is someone at the door, and that he cannot go and see who it is. Why? Because he's there, okay, in the bath. Some speakers like to indicate how their command has relevance to the conversation. Okay? So, like teachers, like you teachers, you say something like this, as you see on A below. I mean, just going back to your point. Just going back to your point in the discussions. Okay, something like this appears in the discussion. This phrase actually, this in fact expression actually appears in the discussions. Okay, what does it mean? They want to have their comment on the relevance to the conversation. They want to say what they teach, like teachers. They want to say, we want to talk about something related to the topic. Okay, again, relation. We are still talking about the third maxim of relation. Now let us move to the last maxim, which is manner. The last is the maxim of manner, about 7 lines to the bottom of the page 35, which says that we should be brief and orderly. brief and orderly, and avoid obscurity. In fact, hiding the facts. We are not going to hide the facts. We are not going to obscure facts. And avoid ambiguity. Well, if you say something that means two things at the same time, this is ambiguous. We are supposed to say something that is not ambiguous, okay? So on page 35, 4 lines to the bottom, we see that there's a kind of text out there, and there's something like this. Just to clarify one point. What does it mean? When you want to clarify one point, you are going to, in fact, observe the Maxim of Manner, which says you should be brief, okay, and orderly, and avoid obscuring and ambiguity. You want to be clear as possible. So this is what we expect from these 4 maxims to be observed. But let us go to page 36, which is, in fact, important. Line 1 of page 36, line 1, says, Grice said that the hearers assume that speakers observe the cooperative principle and that it is the knowledge of the 4 maxims that allows hearers to draw inference about the speaker's interaction and implication. Okay, so we know and everybody knows. We know and everybody knows things like this about the conversations. And the meanings conveyed by speakers and recovered as a result of the hearer's interferences is known as conversational implicatures. We are actually, we talked about implicatures later on. Maybe we actually talked about it in George Yule, okay? So we ended up our discussion here with one thing. Cooperative principle, part of the cooperative principle is, in fact, the maxims of conversation, and the maxims of conversation must be, in fact, observed on page 34. And we will actually finish this part of observing the maxims. Let us now go to flouting the maxims on our next presentation.